John Constantine, a Hellblazer podcast.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to John Constantine, a Hellblazer podcast. Today, we are reading issue number 135. And just a little catch up on what happened in the last one. We started the Warren Ellis run of Hellblazer, which began with John Constantine reading in the newspaper that a woman that apparently he dated back in the day was dead. And this hit him kind of hard and kind of out of nowhere. So he went on a mission to figure out exactly how she died. And through a lot of his contacts and whatnot, figured out that it was a very violent death. And at the end of that issue, we found out that the woman, who's named Isabelle Bracknell, was actually still not at rest, because as John walked out of her flat, which was still a crime scene, and after John was being described how horrifying her death was, he saw someone in a playground across the street, and as he got closer, he saw that it was the ghost of Isabelle dancing around with a bubble wand. So John knows that she is not at rest. And that is where we left off in the last issue, with John just watching her from the street. So first things first, with issue 135, we got the cover. We see John is in the subway. He is about to turn the corner and go down what looks like maybe the service tunnel of one of these subway tracks. And behind him, facing away from him, is a ghostly woman. We can kind of assume that's Isabelle. And we also see on the cover that this is written by Warren Ellis with art by John Higgins. And as we turn to the first page, we start exactly where we left off, with John seeing Isabelle dancing in the playground, and he's just watching her, and he looks kind of sad, and his narration says, "She's dead. Isabelle Bracknell in the Brixton afternoon. This is where we met 7 years ago. She was 19, just starting her degree course in media bollocks at South London Polytechnic. I wasn't 40 yet, all hard as nails, me stepping out of the shadows with me mysterious, 'All right, Squire,' worrying the shit out of everybody for laughs. She was 19, not a care in the world, wandering around with a 30-pence bottle of bubble mix. And as I walked around the corner, there she was, spinning around slowly, utterly aimlessly, ringing herself with summery bubbles. And now here she is again, 7 years later, and 4 days after she died. This is where I met her. We had sex 6 hours later, less than 100 yards from here, and something over half a mile from where she died. It was that place 100 yards away where we did it, for 6 or 7 months. Then we split up. I never saw her again, until I saw mortuary photos of her a few minutes ago. Isabelle Bracknell's dead. This is her ghost." Then we see John take out a cigarette and light it, and as he puffs, it seems like he's kind of thinking, and then as we turn the page, we see he's decided to go up to the ghost. So we see him walking up to her and reaching out one arm towards her, and as he does, she doesn't seem to be paying attention to him at all or notice him, and his hand goes right through her, and his narration continues over this scene. "She's not moving on. She's dead, and she's stuck here. Here, haunting the place where we first met, fixated on this moment, at the instant of her death, and not leaving it. I know how these things work. I need to know how she died, or else she'll never leave, never rest. And I owe her the rest at the very least." Then we see John grab his arm as if maybe it got a little cold as it went through her, and then we get a panel of him walking away as he's decided to figure out what happened to her. Then we turn the page and we cut to later that night, and we see that John is in a pub, and he is reading her diary. And I guess he's turned to the page where she met him. And so he's reading from there, and it says, "How I met him. I was on Shoreditch High Street when he caught my eye. He smiled at me, crossed the road. I started to walk away, and he said, 'Do you want to see some magic?' I nearly told him I'd had quite enough of that bullshit, but something in his eyes stopped me. Something childlike, wanting to please, deriving joy from a promised smile alone. So I said yes. He crossed back over the road and waited. A man in a suit walked past. lumbering towards a yellowing wife and a yellowing house. He started to follow the man, matching his footsteps exactly to the man's. I couldn't help but giggle. He went on for a block or so, and then he scuffed his feet as if falling, and the man fell flat on his face in the road. His name's Josh Wright. He's a magician. Another one. So it seems, although we thought maybe this story was about her, meaning John, it's actually the story of how she met a man named Josh Wright, who's a magician she met after John. So John closes the diary now that he knows who he's looking for, and he also gets some flashes of the crime scene photos of Isabelle's murder, where we see her upper inner thigh says the word Babylon in scar tissue. And then John is also remembering a couple of the other books that she had on her bookshelf. One is the selected writings of Aleister Crowley, and the other just says devil, but we don't see what it's about. And as John takes a big drink, it seems like he puts all these clues together and he figures out what happened. And his narration says, an Aleister Crowley story, Babylon. I know what you did. I'm going to have you, son. So it seems John believes that this man named Joshua Wright is the responsible party for her death. Then we turn the page and we cut to John in the back of Chaz's taxi, and Chaz is saying to him, so Colin's got this fare, wants to go round the arse end of Fashion Street, and he's on the road complaining about it as he goes. He had nothing to complain about, mind. Colin had a face like a bulldog chewing a wasp, and an arse that hadn't seen a solid shit since 1977. Miracle he ever got a fare, what with that face looking out the window and the color of the air in his cab. Anyway, he's taking his fare to the arse end of Fashion Street, so he whips around the corner quick as you like. On the radio he is, still moaning. And the guts drop out of the front end, the back axle breaks in half, and Colin stacks the entire bloody thing into the side of a packy shop. And I should mention that while Chaz is telling the story, John is not listening at all. He is just reading Isabelle's diary in the back, not paying attention. But Chaz doesn't notice, so he continues. And all we hear is him complaining about each thing in turn, 1 second after the next, while he's lying there waiting for the ambulance to turn up. And then he does an impression of this taxi driver named Colin, and he says, I've only gone and shat myself in me best trousers, lads, and I can see me intestines pressing through me shirt. Fuck me, this was an expensive shirt, too. Every cabbie on the firm could hear him on the radio, just quietly complaining about dying horribly on an epoxy 2-pound fare to the arse end of Fashion Street, and all they could do after for weeks was moan about it. You'll never find a more complaining bunch of bastards than cabmen. And as Chaz finishes his story, John says, shut up, Chaz. Then we turn the page and we see John is now dropped off, Chaz is gone, and John is standing in front of a locked gate that leads down into the subway tunnels. And I guess he picks the lock because we see him kind of fussing with it and not doing some kind of spell. And as he walks through the gate and down the steps, his narration says, I hate this part of town. The Bank of England and all the other banks running up away from the old lady of Threadneedle Street. You don't want to know what it makes me think of. Hate the London Underground, too. Always use cabs. Or failing a proper cab, Chaz. Then we see John get to the subway platform, and he says questioningly, map? But he doesn't get a response, so he jumps down to the tracks, and as he walks along them, he says again, map? And then from the darkness of the tunnel, we hear someone say, stop your shouting, John Constantine. Noisy little fucker. Honestly. Then as John walks into the tunnel, we see a black man that is in what looks like maintenance safety gear. Like he's wearing an orange vest and a hard hat that's orange. And he also has a big sledgehammer that he has over his left shoulder and a big flashlight in his right hand. It seems this man's name is Map, and he's servicing something on the tracks. And when John sees him, John says, I tell you, Map, you've got the worst sodden job in London. And Map replies, you know nothing. Best job in London. And then they both turn and begin to walk down the tracks into the darkness. And John says, what, spending every bloody night walking the tube? There's nigh on 300 miles of this. And Map replies, the underground has to be tidied, John Constantine. Litter to be cleared, obstacles to be removed. Otherwise, the trains can't run. Life is very simple down here. Every night I walk the tube under London, clearing the tracks. I love my life. And as he says this, we see he's got a big smile on his face. And Map continues saying, I mean, I could go back up there, be the king of the magicians that all those people wanted me to be. But I can see them all quite clearly from down here. And then he points with his sledgehammer up to the ceiling, and in the art it looks like the ceiling goes clear, almost like it's made of glass, and then we can see a bunch of different scenes of people in town and what's happening to them. So we see some people vomiting and being drunk, then we see some people sitting in what looks like a movie theater, we see some people using the restroom and getting a drink from a water fountain, and it seems like this is actually really happening. Like, the area around John and Map has turned blue, reflecting from the color of the glass, and John has stopped and is looking up at this as well. And as John lights a cigarette, he says, That's kind of why I came down here to see you, Map. And then Map turns to him and says, I know you did, John Constantine. And yes, I know I owe you, because you got me the worst sodden job in London, which I love. So it seems like this man named Map has powers, which his name might suggest actually, where he can locate anybody in the town of London. So John says to Map, There's a man I'm looking for, name of Joshua Wright. I want to know his manner. And Map looks at John suspiciously and asks, Well now, that's a magician's name, isn't it? What's the score here, John Constantine? What's your game? Not asking your old friend Map to fuck with competition, I'd hope. And John answers, Ex-girlfriend of mine turned up dead. This Wright bloke's involved. I think he fancies himself a bit of a Crowley, know what I mean? And Map replies, Well, why don't you tell me what you mean? And John says, I mean, he's trying to be Aleister Crowley. The whole manipulative head games, suck 'em dry, great beast 666 bit. Give me what I need, and I'll be able to leave you alone again, Map. Then we get this really cool splash page where we see the city of London from above, like from the clouds view, and we see a giant version of some features of Map's face in it. So we see his eyes, his nose, and his mouth kind of incorporated into this city view. And Map says, All alone, John Constantine. Just me and London. Then we turn the page and we cut to a very dilapidated looking apartment complex, I believe. And I think this is just later that same night, because it is nighttime still. And we see people huddled together under blankets, and then also some of them are doing drugs. And one of the men who is smoking crack out of a makeshift crack pipe out of a soda can is saying, Crowley's kind of bleeding pointless these days, isn't he? This Wright geezer must be a right poof. I mean, don't get me wrong. Crowley's fucked loads of birds, traveled the world, climbed mountains, the whole 9 yards. But as far as magic goes, a bit crap and not exactly scary. Know what I mean? Now, what am I trying to put together? That's a bit tasty, yeah? And then he begins to light the crack on the top of the soda can and sucking in through a hole on the side. And then we pull out from him and we see he's talking to John, and John is saying, Crack magic ain't gonna get you a Channel 4 documentary, Darren. Give it up now, mate. Thanks for giving us a place to rest me dogs anyway. And Darren looks up at him and smiles and says, No problem, John. Nice one. Oh, and if you see me, kid, give us a shout, yeah? And as John turns and begins to walk away from him, he says, Kid's probably with your girlfriend, who's probably clipping off some punter for rock money that you'll never see, you poor bastard. Time was you were bloody clever, too. And as John gets out of the doorway, he sees a naked baby crawling around in filth in the stairwell. And I really hope not, but I guess maybe that's the kid that Darren was saying to let him know if John sees him. Then we turn the page and we cut to the next morning where John is walking early in the streets. He's seeing like newspapers being delivered and stuff. And he stops in front of a shop that has a sign that says The World's End. And then he continues to go down a back alley. And over these panels, the narration says, Camden Town Tube Station used to be the favorite execution site on this end of the city. They liked hanging highwaymen here. The pub directly opposite used to be a coaching inn called the Mother Redcap, named after the witch who used to live there back in the 17th century. She must have had a terrific view of the neck snapping and the piss running down the swinging legs. Mary Shelley was born down the road. Frankenstein doesn't come as much of a surprise. Then we see John come out into the backside of the alley, and there's a bunch of what looks like homeless men just standing around, and John's narration continues saying, Neither does old Sparrow Fart hanging around here. This is one of London's main casual labor pickup points. If your face fits, building contractors will shoot in, stuff you in the back of a van, and work you to death for cash in hand. Sparrowfart was a shit magician and a rotten pimp, but a surprisingly useful electrician. Sad, really. And then as John is saying this, we're focusing on a man who is white and very thin, and he's got a bit of a rat face, and he's wearing sunglasses. And this man seems to notice John, and he says, "Bloody John Constantine. That's fucked my day right up seeing you." And John gets a big grin on his face, and he actually opens his arms like he's about to give the man a hug, and he says, "Sparrowfart, me old China, how you doing?" And Sparrowfart answers, "Fucking awful. I'm on the bleeding cash in hand, so I can afford to look after me brother, and me name's fucking Hawkstorm, right?" And then he kind of starts to make a scene as he raises his voice, and he points at John and he says, "Don't come all matey with me, you bastard. I know it was you gave my brother Paul acid, because you thought he'd raped Keely Dawson." And John is kind of taken aback, so he stops and he says, "And then he saw Jesus and chopped his cock off. I wonder why Jesus wanted him to chop his cock off." So he's saying that because I assume John knew that his brother was guilty of raping this girl, and he's insinuating that the man was guilty, and that's why his conscience, while on acid, made him cut off his dick. So with a big grin on his face, John pulls out a cigarette, and he tries to light it, but for some reason all he can get is sparks. And if you remember, in the last issue, he bought a new lighter, but maybe he's using it a bunch, or there just seems to be less fuel in these new ones. So as John smiles, he says, "Well now, Sparrowfart, I think a bit of a windfall might come your way. Enough to provide some care for harmless little Paul even. Joshua Wright. Crowleyan style, just like you. And you know all those twats, I know you do. He tried to build a Scarlet Woman, Sparrowfart, and his form gets you 10 grand cash. His background, Sparrowfart." And then John looks down at his lighter angrily, and he says, "I swear, these bloody things don't last 5 minutes anymore." And then Sparrowfart kind of pauses and thinks about what John said, and then under his breath he says, "My place, 11 tonight." Then we turn the page and we cut to John going into his local corner store, and it's the same one he went into in the last issue with his friend Sanjay who runs it. And as John walks in, he looks at Sanjay and says, "60 silk cut and give us another disposable lighter." And as he gets to the counter, Sanjay pulls out a black lighter that has a picture on it. We can't really make it out, but John looks at it and says, "And what's this in aid of?" And then we get a zoomed in panel of the face on the lighter, and it is the face of Princess Diana, who, if you don't know, died in a car accident in the 90s. And as Sanjay gets the packs of cigarettes for John, he says, "One of the local papers is doing them. There's going to be another day of remembrance. The idea is that at midnight, we'll all go out into High Street, raise our lit special Diana lighters over our heads, like a Dire Straits concert or something, and have a minute's silence." And as Sanjay is saying this, he's getting a regular red lighter and putting it in front of John, and John puts down the Princess Diana one and leaves some money and says, "Sometimes, Sanjay, I wonder where it is I'm living." And Sanjay replies, "Welcome to New Britain, John. Enjoy the immigrant experience." And John also chuckles as he leaves. Then we turn the page and we cut to nighttime, and John is in bed, but he is not sleeping. It seems the full moon light is keeping him up, so he reaches for his cigarettes. Then we cut to a panel of him shaving with an electric razor and drinking some tea, and I guess he's getting ready for his meeting with Sparrowfart, because as he's about to leave, the television says, 10 o'clock on Channel 4, time for Friends. And I'm assuming they're talking about the 90s American show Friends. And John says to himself, "Time for Friends." I'm not sure exactly what he's insinuating. Maybe he's surprised that that's playing on BBC 4 or something. But that gives John about an hour to walk to Sparrowfart's place. So he leaves his apartment and he begins to walk. And as he does, we see someone round a corner behind him and begin to follow him. And then someone is walking towards John from the other way. And then John is stopped in between the two men, and he looks up at the man in front of him, and then he turns and sees the man behind him. And then we get a panel of John raising his fist, but I'm not sure if he was actually planning on fighting or not, because he doesn't get a chance to swing or anything, because he is kicked in the back of the knee by the guy behind him. And as he goes down to the ground on his knees, he is punched in the face. And the man who punched him actually breaks his pinky knuckle on John's face. But that only seems to anger the attacker, as John is being kicked by both men as he kind of turtles himself trying to protect his head. And the man who hurt his hand is yelling, "You hurt my fucking hand!" And then they begin to kick him in the face as well. And once he's all bloody and beaten pretty badly, one of the men grabs him by the hair and pulls John's head back, and he says, "Josh Wright does what he fucking likes. You keep your nose out of it, you stupid old bastard. Next time, we'll fucking kill you, arswipe." And then he smashes John's face into the pavement, and then we get a black panel, so we can assume that John just passed out from that. And that, my friends, is the end of the issue. So if you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can email me at planestrains.and-comicbooks, all one word, @gmail.com, and we will see you on the next one.